Hi, I'm Kelly from AMS, and I'm here with Paul Moak in his wonderful Smoakstack studios. This is such an awesome space, Paul. Thank you for having us here.
Thanks for coming. Glad to have you.
Well, I just had the pleasure of watching you produce a song that I wrote, and you only had like 2 or 3 listens before we jumped right into it. Mm-hmm. Can you unpack for me what was going through your head when you first heard it and how you were able to get to producing so quickly?
Well, the first 15 seconds of you singing made me exhale and know that everything was going to be okay.
Oh, thank you.
Because if the vocal's not there and the believability and the performance, then it makes my job a lot tougher. And I knew that after hearing the song the first time that it was going to be smooth sailing. So for me, it was a lot of fun.
You just picked up instruments and like immediately seemed to have ideas. Is that always how you operate? Or does it sometimes take you a little bit longer to figure out what you're going to add to somebody's song?
It depends on the song. But yeah, there's always an emotional energy that I'm trying to connect with that will make me think, oh, the B3 or the piano or whatever. So it's kind of different every time. Just trying to stay open and let the ideas come through, you know?
Is it easier to do if you're producing something in a genre that you tend to listen to a lot?
That's a great question. I usually try to get as educated and informed about the artist and the style before I go in. But yeah, I mean, the song that you brought is very much in the wheelhouse of what I love. So it made it a lot easier to just be myself inside of it, you know?
That's awesome. How would you go about it if you felt like it was like way out of your wheelhouse, like something you've never done before?
Hire other people to help out. A lot of listening and knowing when you do need to ask for help. I mean, that's a big thing. I'm not going to try to be the hero on something that I don't really have a steep knowledge in, you know. But part of the job of the producer is to come with a wide swath of musical influences. And so I spend a lot of time listening to music, you know, even music that I'm not, that isn't my go-to, you know. I have my, like, when I want to get in my car and drive and feel things and cry, I have the type of music that I love. But as a producer, I've got to listen to all of it, you know.
Yeah, you kind of become like a student and
absolutely
you study music.
Always learning. That's a big part of it.
When you're writing your own music, do you find that you try not to have too many outside influences of other things, or are you like trying to mine things from other things that you hear?
When I'm writing, I'm usually writing with someone, helping them on their song. And so I try to take any kind of influence out of it and just be in like a flow state of letting the ideas come through. When I'm writing for myself, that's usually to process emotion or come to terms with something, and I'm never writing for like if anyone's going to hear it or be commercial, you know. So that's a whole separate thing. But writing in terms of the context of my job is helping people get their idea out. And so for that, it's just listening to all kinds of music, coming in here and turning everything off to the outside world and just being present, you know?
Yeah.
Because to me, with music, especially writing, there's a mysticism to it of
totally.
Where does it come from? How does it happen? And I've just accepted the fact that it's not of my own volition. I just have to be here and hope that today's the day that it's allowed to come through me, you know?
That kind of mysticism doesn't always do well in like a professional setting. Like if you have to write for a job, it's hard to like capture an essence of something if you don't know it's going to be there. How do you account for that on days that you're not inspired?
Yeah, that's a tough one because especially we're here in Nashville, this town loves setting up co-writes, you know?
Yeah.
And they're usually, you know, 4 or 5 hours set aside, if that, to flesh out an idea. The older that I've gotten, the more that I've realized I'm going to continue to show up, but I can't be beholden to having a finished song by the end of that time. To me, it hurts the process. You show up, you do the work. There's two sides to writing. There's the craft side, and co-writing's great for that. You show up every day and you work on the craft. But then there's that mysticism, the where do songs come from, the life experience. And that's really the thing that people connect with at the end of the day. And I have no control over that. So I'm going to come in and work on the craft. Every day is not a home run, you know. And I'm okay with that. In fact, I like it when someone calls me, an artist calls me and says, I have something we got to work on, because then I know it's based on inspiration and not on the calendar, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you ever had like a really bad co-write?
I've had more really bad co-writes than I've had really great co-writes, but that's usually because of where I'm at, you know. I think that, I've been in the room just paired up with the wrong person, and I've even had that happen, and then they became huge, you know. So I think if you're gonna write as much as I have, the percentage of songs that are going to be ones that you're really connected to and really move you is going to be small.
Sure.
It's just a law of averages, you know?
Yeah. How do you know when something that you're writing is special, when you're writing so much? Is there like a feeling you get or something that you know as you're making it that it's going to be really, really good?
Usually for me, if I instantly want to produce it, I know that there's something in there that is pulling at me, because, you know, most of my job is production. And so the last thing I want to do is make a demo of a song that I'm not connected with. And so if at the end of writing it, I want to go straight into making it, I know that it's something that really means something to me. As far as like commercial success or how people feel about it outside of the studio, I have no idea how that works or why certain songs connect and certain songs don't. All the ones that I've felt great about that have connected outside of the studio, I felt great about in the studio, but I've felt great about a lot that didn't do anything afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
And some of that's just timing, music business, what the artist needed for their record at that time. You know, I've had a song that I wrote, and then like the artist put it on their record maybe like 3 records later. Just needed to be the right time for them in their career and what they were trying to do. So all that stuff is kind of out of my control. I just show up, try to do the best work that I can, and hope that it'll mean something to somebody else outside of here, you know?
Yeah. I couldn't help but notice as you were producing that you have really, really good instincts. You just kind of like went with your first thought. How do you learn to trust your ears like that?
Lots and lots of years of practice. You know, I think all the instruments that I played today, I've definitely logged the 10,000 hour, you know, rule on, and they're friends of mine. If it's weird to say, like, I've just spent a lot of time on the piano, on the B3, on the guitar, and so I play my best when I just, again, turn my brain off and just try to let all of those years of practicing and the knowledge just kind of be there, but rely on, like you said, the instinct and feel. To me, it's like why I'm playing something on a song is not to have that instrument on the song. It's to emote a feeling.
Sure, yeah.
And so I have to be emoting a feeling for that to work,
right.
If that makes sense.
Is that ever hard to do if you're doing something that feels more like an assignment, or like if it is for like, I know you've written for like Taco Bell. Is that harder? You know, you don't necessarily get like emotional about like a cheesy gordita crunch.
Right.
So
Well, I do love me some cheesy gordita crunches.
I don't know, maybe you do.
No, you know, what's funny is placements like that, I'm sure I know there are times where a company will come to a person and say, we would like to commission you to write for you know, our taco company. But in the case of most of the placements that I've had, they're all songs that I was just working on that someone else connected the dots for them to be. So the song that was on the Taco Bell commercial, we had no idea when we were working on it that was where it was going to end up, you know. And that's okay, you know. To me, it's like, again, shutting out the outside world, and sure, you hope for all that kind of stuff, but really it's just what matters to the people in the studio at this given moment, you know.
So you don't attach yourself too much to like the context that the song is going to eventually exist in?
The only context is if the hair on the back of my neck is standing up when we're listening back, you know. That's really the only motivator. Because for me, anytime I start to think about what could happen, it destroys the part of me that is being honest inside the creation. And if I'm not honest inside what I'm creating, then there actually is no chance for it to be successful outside of here. Now, again, other people might work other ways, but for me, it's that. And also, if I put all my hope in what happens outside when a song leaves this room, then most days I'm going to be disappointed. Right. Because most songs aren't going to do what you hope they're going to do. So I have to enjoy what's happening right now and have that be enough. And then everything else is icing on the cake. And the reason I really believe that is because it also allows a song to affect one person, and that's totally worth it, right? If a song leaves here and one person had their day changed because of what they heard, then it was worth it. If I start judging my work by numbers of, you know, sales or chart position or commerciality, then I'm not going to be satisfied with the fact that one person's life was altered by a creation that I did. That should be more than thrilling to know that something you did affected somebody else, you know?
Yeah. But on the flip side, I know you've had some very surreal moments, like your music was played at the International Space Station?
It was.
How did that come to be?
I produced an artist named Matt Marr, who's a very good friend of mine, who's on a label that's a subsidiary of Sony. And they have a daily song played every morning in the International Space Station. And the astronaut that was in the space station at that time asked to play Matt's song. And so they played it from space, and I got to hear a recording of it, of them saying good morning to the space station and everything. It was pretty surreal.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. Crazy.
What's the most surreal thing that has happened in this studio?
Man, that's a great question. I think probably the most surreal thing that's happened in the studio was seeing Ann Wilson from the band Heart and Dolly Parton fangirl on each other.
Yeah, wow.
And both not believing that the other person was starstruck, you know. And they both were. And that was definitely the most surreal moment.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you ever get starstruck?
All the time. I can't afford to get starstruck in the studio because my job is to be cool with whatever's happening. Mm-hmm. So I do the work and then I go home and I'm like, I can't believe that happened, you know? So my starstruckness is delayed, but everybody gets that way, you know?
If you had to describe the ideal artist to work with, like somebody who prepared exactly right, made your job as easy as possible, how would that be? Who would they be to you?
I think the ideal artist for me is someone who knows exactly who they are and where they want to go, but they're looking for someone to collaborate on the journey to get there. And so that means someone that's focused and determined, but also open to possibility of change.
Sure, yeah. Do you ever encounter communication issues when you're working with an artist, like trying to express your vision and theirs, and it's just not meshing?
Yeah, that definitely happens. A lot of times where it's hard for me is if I feel like our visions aren't aligning, I will jump to their vision because they're the artists and I'm ultimately here to serve. Where it gets hard is when I feel like their vision is tainted because of outside influence. So the label wants me to do this, or, you know, my sister's boyfriend said that I should kick the guitar player out of the band, or whatever it is, you know. Then that's really the only time it gets confrontational from me asking, what's your motive for your vision? And let's align that with what you really want on the inside, and then I'll totally go there with you, you know. And, you know, look, I deal in commercial music, so there's always a kind of moving needle between art and commerce. And part of the producer's job is to make sure that we're staying somewhere within the bounds of commerciality, and it's always going to be there's always going to be tension in that.
Sure. Does that commercial element ever take away any of the magic for you?
Certainly. And that's just part of the battle that you fight, you know. Now, again, I don't know. When I'm producing a record, I'm not thinking about making a hit. There are people that are very talented at doing that, and that's why there's hits out there, and that's great. All of the success that I've had has been because the work that I did based off of how I produce, which is from the heart, it just connected in a real way, and that's okay too, you know. But I don't know how to operate from a business perspective when I'm producing. It has to be, and I think it's because I'm a musician first, you know, so it has to move me musically. And sometimes I don't think that moves me away from being successful. It's just a different way of approaching a song. And also, for the record, it's probably how most of my heroes approached their songs. So that's why I continue to do it.
Who are your heroes?
Gosh. In terms of artists or producers?
All of the above.
Okay. Well, artists, I mean, the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Nirvana. I just saw Green Day last week and they were amazing. It was kind of like a full circle moment to my childhood, and I could not believe how good they were. In terms of producers, Brendan O'Brien, Rick Rubin, obviously George Martin, although he's, you know, on another level. Those are probably the big ones for me.
Is there anything specific that any of your heroes have achieved, like with their music or their production, that you have been chasing, or a goal that you've been striving towards that you like can't quite reach?
Yeah, absolutely. They've all managed to hit like a plateau in, I don't know if plateau is the right word. They've all managed to hit with multiple artists on a level that moves me immensely. You know, Brendan O'Brien did so many records across so many genres that have been important to me, as opposed to maybe I like one record that this other producer had a hand in. Same with Rick Rubin, like genreless, really. Maybe that's the answer to your question, is like, I would love to be a genreless producer.
Just amorphous producer. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. And I also think at least in the case of both Brendan O'Brien and Rick Rubin, I don't hear their influence as much on the record. Like some guys, you know it's their record, and they've just put the artist through the filter of how they make records. I like producers that the artist, it's just the best the artist has sounded, right? But you go listen to another artist that same producer did, and it could sound totally different, but it's the best version of that artist. That to me is the mark of a great producer, because you're leaving your mark on the artist and not on the sound of the record.
Right, you're serving the song.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great question.
Thank you. How did you first come to the decision to open your own studio, and what were the first steps that you took?
Yeah. I moved to town just to be a guitar player. I wanted to be the next Slash or Joe Perry, you know, and got to Nashville and toured with a bunch of bands, spent about a little over a decade on the road. And I came across at the time that Pro Tools got inexpensive enough for people to start having rigs in their home, right? And so in the early 2000s, I bought a laptop and actually, it wasn't even Pro Tools. It was Digital Performer, which I don't even know if that's around anymore.
I think it's around.
Motu. Anyway, I got interested in, can I record guitar at my house, right? And so I had a little rig with 2 channels, and I started having friends send me files. Or actually, at that time, it was actually bringing over a hard drive, because you couldn't send files over the internet easily. And I just started playing on people's records, and it just grew one channel at a time. It's like, man, it'd be great to do an acoustic vocal. Oh, it'd be cool if we could add a second mic, you know. Oh, it'd be cool if we could do the drums, nothing crazy, just 3 mics, you know. And I just got obsessed with recording and with growing it. And so it started in a bedroom, and then it's ended up here over, 25 years.
25 years, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a lot of gear in here. I figured it must have taken a while to accumulate all that.
Yeah, well, a lot of it, too, is touring on the road. I'm a junkie for going and finding a mom-and-pop guitar shop or pawn store and just seeing what's out there, you know. Not so much these days. Stuff comes to me now. People are like, oh, Paul might like this, you know, and I'm okay with that.
Is there any piece of gear or anything you got along the way that you felt like really leveled you up from bedroom producer to professional sounding recordings?
Yeah. I mean, all of it matters. You know, what I tell people is what I've spent the most time trying to learn is how to make the sound that you're recording sound good before it even hits the microphone.
Yeah.
That's 95% of the sound. But that last 5% is so important in what separates the men from the boys in terms of record making. And so this whole place is the last 5%, right? And that's what I've obsessed about, that 5% for my whole career. And so I would say microphone choice, and then that's the most important after you've gotten the sound right coming off whatever it is you're recording. Honestly, after that, it's kind of preference to taste on preamp and compressor and EQ. And they all matter, but getting the sound right at the source and choosing the right microphone is everything to me. So every time I've gotten a mic that I instantly notice ups the game, like you were saying, those are days where I'm super excited. And, even like today when we were working on You, finding the right mic that rejected enough vocal because you were singing and playing at the same time. A lot of times in between records, we'll play around with all that stuff so that when the artist walks through the door and they say, I'd love to play and sing at the same time, it's like, okay, I know a mic combination that works really great for that and gives us a lot of separation. So we nerd out on that stuff all the time.
And then there's less you have to do in the mixing phase too, when everything sounds good to begin with.
Yeah, I'm definitely, I guess, old school in the idea that I don't want to just capture something and then manipulate it inside the computer. I want to get it where when it's going into the computer, it sounds like what we're after already. And then you can do a million things from there with the computer. You know?
And mixing is so subjective too. You can like tweak little things forever. How do you know when something is good enough to be finished and to stop tweaking with?
When we've run out of money to work on it. There's a phrase that say, your record's never done. You just stop working on it. For me, when I'm mixing, usually what I do is ask the artist to step out until I've gotten the song to a place where I feel like I'm completely satisfied with this. And it happens pretty quick because, again, for me, it's an emotional response. And then the artist comes in, and from that point, it makes it way easier for me to adjust to mix tweaks because I already got the thing where my vision is complete. So now if they want to completely change that, I'm okay with it because I already got the song to where I felt like it needed to go. And usually an artist tweaks at that point, just level it up again. Because if I'm going for a feel and an emotional response, then you can change all kinds of stuff inside of that, and it doesn't change how it's hitting me. If an artist wants to, usually it's, I don't like the way I sang this phrase. I think I can hear the auto-tune on this, vocal or whatever, and we can address that, and that's easy. Or the kick drum's too loud, or whatever. As long as it's not ripping apart the DNA of what I feel like the song is emoting, then we can do whatever the artist wants. And usually we go maybe a round or two. Sometimes it takes longer, Sometimes you're on mix number 9 and you're pulling your hair out. For the most part, to answer your question, I know when a song's done when the artist says, I feel great about this, And for me, setting up the mix the way that I do is just a quicker way to get to that end result, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. When you're working with such emotional stuff, when you're producing, are you thinking about it on the emotional structure of like the entire song, or like creating a build, creating dynamics? Or are you thinking more like individual lines and like smaller micro emotional moments in the song?
I think for me, it's does the song capture me from the time it starts to the time it stops? And so it's probably both at different times. Like the song we worked on today is just kind of this wave, mostly because of the way I think you were playing the acoustic guitar. It's this wave that starts and it just continues and grows until it kind of reaches the shore, and then it's, the water comes back. There are other songs where it might be, we need to go, something isn't right about this one section. We need to is it an overdub? Do we take something out? So it's both. But for me, I'm definitely a big picture guy. So a lot of times the artist will be like, I sang the wrong word there. And I totally didn't pick up on it because I'm just lost in the grandness of the whole thing. That happens all the time. And I like being a big picture guy because to me, it's like I'm not sweating on the small stuff. I'm just making sure that the song on the whole is moving the air in the room,
Yeah. That dynamic structure of growing and growing and reaching a crescendo and then dipping back down. I tend to always write that way. That's always the pattern that I write in. Do you ever have patterns you fall into that you feel like you consciously try to break? Yeah,
absolutely. I think at this point in my career, I'm more of a minimalist producer. Like what's on here that doesn't need to be on here, And so a lot of times, the mistake that I make is not putting enough ear candy in something to keep someone's attention, because it's got my attention, but I need to, I guess, remember that everyone doesn't listen to music the way that we do.
Right.
So I always appreciate when an artist pushes back on me of like, let me try this, or can we add this? I find myself now saying yes to those questions way more than trying to shut it down, because you can always come back and take something off.
Sure,
you know?
yeah. Are there ever times when an artist gives too much input or like too many notes?
Sure, yeah. I mean, artists can get way too inside the song, way too inside their vocal.
Yeah, I do
and
that.
so part of my thing is like just reassuring them that as a listener, like, I'm not hearing it like that. I hear how great and believable this is. You might not like the way that you sang this one syllable, but that's actually the thing that pulls me in, because it's human, you know. And then realizing when the difference, there's a big difference between convincing an artist that what they're doing is great and realizing that we need to change it because they're never going to be okay with it, you know. And so there's always that kind of balance that you're working through on any record.
Right, yeah. It can be easy to kind of miss the forest for the trees sometimes.
Right. And sometimes I know when I'm recording something, if I get too bogged down in having to punch, and you know, it's kind of like surfing, where I'm looking where that pass where I kind of get lost, and I wake up at the end and realize, oh wow, I just like channeled this pass. If I'm not hitting that, sometimes I'll just walk away and come back, you know, with a fresh perspective. And I encourage the artists to do that a lot too. Like, it shouldn't have to be, some things are a battle, but it shouldn't have to be a struggle from top to bottom, you know. That means we just haven't caught the wave.
Sure. Do you ever walk away and come back and then find that it doesn't sound anything like you thought it sounded?
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like that happens to me all the time.
Oh, yeah. And that's okay. Sometimes it's surprising in the other way, where you maybe got too close to something, you walk away thinking it was garbage, and you come back the next day and you're like, actually, this is awesome. I don't hear any of the stuff I was. Yeah. So I'm open to both. Yeah. Sometimes getting outside of the studio is the best way to gain some perspective.
Totally. Do you have a project that you've worked on that you're most proud of, or your favorite? I know it can be hard, but
gosh, I mean, there's so many artists that I've had the pleasure of working with that I'm really proud of the stuff that we've done. I mean, selfishly, if I had to answer that question today, I'm in a band called Tripsitter with Ann Wilson from Heart and a couple of session friends of mine. And we put out a record last year that I'm super proud of. And definitely would love for everybody to check it out.
What's it called?
It's called Another Door.
Check it out, everybody.
Yeah.
And is there anything coming up for the future that you're really excited about?
Oh, yeah. Tomorrow. You know, I have a lot of things on the horizon, but I like to know that stuff's out there, but to really kind of focus on what am I working on now? Because anybody that spent any time in the music business knows stuff comes and goes like that. And so for me, I'm always looking at basically one day at a time. So tomorrow I'm cutting a string section on a record, and I'm super excited about where we're at in the process. And string players are good friends of mine, so it'll be fun to have them over. So that's what I'm focused on at the moment.
Really, really cool.
Yeah.
Have you heard of AMS? Do you know what we do?
Yes, actually, This is the reason why I was super excited to do this interview. I had Guitar World magazine as a kid and sent off the little insert for American Musical Supply. And I would lay in my bed and just turn the pages looking at Les Pauls and Strats and hoping one day. So it's really a cool full circle moment to be here with you now.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. That was absolutely incredible.
Thank you. I really enjoyed working with you today.
Really enjoyed being here.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to Paul and everyone at the Smoakstack for having us here today. Make sure to check out the studio session we recorded. That'll be in another video. And if you want to scratch that recording itch for yourself, head on over to AmericanMusical.com.